Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. I am Miles, and I have been married to my wife, Genesis, for 8 years. She has a daughter, Adeline, 24 now, from her previous marriage. From day one, Adeline made it clear she wanted nothing to do with me. She was 16 when Genesis and I started dating, and I understood. Divorce is hard on kids. I never tried to force anything. I gave her space, tried to be friendly when we crossed paths. Still, no matter what I did, she kept her distance. Over the years, I made it a point to show up for everything that mattered. Her high school graduation, college events, birthdays. I always brought thoughtful gifts, tried to ask about her classes or hobbies. But most of the time, she'd barely acknowledge me. Sometimes she'd walk out of the room as soon as I entered. Other times, she'd just talk over me like I wasn't even standing there. Genesis would speak to her privately, never harshly, always gently. Just be polite, she'd urge her. But I always told Genesis not to push it. I figured Adeline would come around in her own time, or maybe not at all. Either way, I didn't want to force her into anything. Her father, Nathan, was never a problem. We weren't friends, but we were civil, which was good enough for me. We could be in the same room without tension, and I appreciated that. Then something shifted. About 2 months ago, Adeline started being nice. Like, genuinely nice. Out of nowhere, she sent me a meme one afternoon about graphic design, my field, and followed up with, "This reminded me of you." I almost dropped my phone. Then she started asking about my work, sending messages just to check in. A week later, she invited me to lunch. Just the two of us. I was stunned, but thrilled. After 8 years of cold shoulders and awkward silences, I thought we were finally making progress. Genesis was over the moon. Every time Adeline reached out, she'd squeeze my arm or give me that smile that said, "See? It's happening." And for the first time, I started to believe the ice had truly thawed. Then came the engagement party. It was last weekend. Jake, Adeline's fiancé, is a solid guy. Polite, respectful, clearly devoted to her. The kind of man who opens doors and laughs at her jokes like they're the funniest thing in the world. The party was at a restaurant, a private room that held maybe 40 people. It was warm, lively, lots of love in the air. Friends, extended family, some of Jake's old college buddies. Everyone was in good spirits. Midway through the evening, Adeline stood up and gently tapped her glass with a fork. Clink, clink. The room quieted. Conversations trailed off, and all eyes turned to her. She looked a little nervous but composed, holding Jake's hand lightly as she cleared her throat. "Thank you all so much for coming," she said, her voice steady but soft. "It means the world to Jake and me to be surrounded by all of you tonight." She glanced at Jake with a warm smile, and I could see the emotion in her eyes. "We've both been so lucky to have love and support from our families and friends," she continued, scanning the room. "I want to take a minute to thank a few people specifically." There were a few light murmurs and smiles as people straightened in their chairs. Jake, of course, she looked at him and the room chuckled, for loving me and putting up with my chaos. That drew laughter. Genesis gave my knee a little squeeze. My friends, for sticking by me. And then, she turned to Genesis and me, and for a second, my heart actually lifted. "I also want to thank my dad and Miles for being here," Adeline said, her voice clear, steady. "Miles, I know we've had our differences, but I've really enjoyed getting to know you better these past few weeks." I felt Genesis squeeze my hand under the table. I couldn't even look at her. I was trying to keep myself composed. Adeline kept going. "You've shown me what it means to be generous and caring." I was genuinely moved. My throat tightened. After 8 years of trying, of showing up, of getting nothing but cold shoulders and silences, I thought this was it. This was the breakthrough. I actually smiled, nodded at her. Maybe I even teared up a little. But then she kept going. "Which is why I know you'll be happy to help make my dream wedding come true." My smile faltered. She looked right at me and said, "Dad mentioned you came into some money from your mom's estate last year. And since you don't have kids of your own, I thought you might want to contribute to your stepdaughter's special day." I heard a couple of awkward chuckles. Someone coughed. My ears were ringing. "The venue we want is $50,000 for the whole package." And just like that, the room went dead silent. I just stared at her. Everyone else stared at me. All I could think, the past 2 months, was it all an act? Did she just play me for a donation? I stood up, pushing my chair back a little harder than I meant to. Genesis whispered, "Miles." I looked straight at Adeline. "So, the past 2 months were fake? You were just buttering me up for money." She rolled her eyes. Rolled her damn eyes. "It's not fake to be nice to family when you need help," she said, flatly. "That's what families do." My hands clenched into fists. "Family?" I asked. "I haven't been family to you for 8 years." I've been an inconvenience you couldn't wait to get away from. And now that I have something you want, suddenly I'm family. I grabbed my jacket off the back of my chair and turned to leave. Genesis jumped up and followed me out into the hallway. Miles, please, she said, trying to keep her voice low. That was not okay. You made a scene. I'm not going back in there, I said, shaking my head. I can't. She looked mortified. She kept glancing toward the door like she wanted to rush back in and do damage control. We should have handled this privately. I was ambushed in a speech, I snapped. In front of 40 people. She didn't respond to that. She just stood there, arms folded, looking torn between me and the mess inside. I went home. Since then, I've gotten a string of texts from Adeline, calling me selfish, dramatic. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. The first text was from Adeline. I can't believe you did that at my engagement party. You're selfish and dramatic. I was trying to include you, and you made it all about yourself. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just sat there staring at the screen, rereading her words. Selfish. Dramatic. Like she hadn't just publicly blindsided me with a $50,000 request in front of everyone. Then Nathan chimed in. I don't usually get involved, but what you did to Adeline last night was cruel. You humiliated her in front of everyone on what was supposed to be a joyful occasion. I almost laughed at that. I humiliated her? She stood up in a room full of people and casually announced that I had inherited money and should use it to fund her dream venue. But sure, I was the villain. That evening, Genesis and I sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The silence between us had weight. She stirred her tea, eyes fixed on the cup, not on me. I'm not mad at you, she said finally, quietly. I looked up. Could have fooled me. She sighed. I think what Adeline did was wrong. Really wrong. She should have come to you privately. That speech? That was manipulative and out of line. That gave me a little relief. So you get why I walked out. She nodded. Yes, but I also think the way you reacted made it worse. My shoulders tensed. I reacted to being used. Genesis. What was I supposed to do? Smile and say, sure, Adeline, I'll cut you a $50,000 check for the relationship you pretended to have with me for 8 weeks. No, she said softly. But maybe wait until after the party. Pull her aside. Talk to her one-on-one. That moment, out there in front of everyone. You gave her the story she wanted. What are you talking about? She already sees you as the outsider. Genesis said, meeting my eyes finally. Now she gets to say you humiliated her in front of her friends and family. She gets to feel like the victim. I shook my head. She is not the victim. She staged a public emotional shakedown. I'm not defending what she did, Miles. But I wish you hadn't played into it by blowing up and leaving. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. So, you think I was wrong for calling her out publicly and leaving? Genesis hesitated. I think you were right to feel hurt. I think you were right to say no. But yes, I wish you had handled it differently. I didn't say anything after that. I just sat there, staring at the darkening sky outside the kitchen window, wondering how long it would take to stop feeling like I'd been sucker-punched by someone I had finally started to believe wanted me in their life. She deliberately put me on the spot, I said to Genesis later that night, pacing around our bedroom. She thought I wouldn't dare say no. Not in front of everyone. Genesis sat on the edge of the bed, quiet, watching me. Play stupid games, I muttered, win stupid prizes. She exhaled and nodded slowly. That's what hurt the most. Using the public setting as leverage. I stopped pacing and looked at her. She knew exactly what she was doing. Genesis nodded again. Yes, she did. There was a beat of silence. Then I asked, Did you ever tell her about the inheritance? Yes, she said. I mean, not in detail. But yes, she knows. We're transparent about finances, you and me. I frowned. So how did it come up? Genesis looked uneasy. She was venting about how expensive everything was. Venue, catering, flowers, and I mentioned you'd received something from your mom's estate. I never said you would pay for anything. I swear. I was just trying to be sympathetic about how ridiculous wedding costs have gotten. I watched her carefully. Her voice was steady. She wasn't hiding anything. I believe you, I said. You've always been careful. You've kept everything separate when it comes to the kids. I know that. Still, it stung. Later, a friend of mine texted. What kind of nice things was she doing during those 2 months? I'm curious about the effort level of this con. I stared at the question, thumb hovering over my phone. Then I typed. It was all surface level. Sending TikToks. Asking how my day was. Once, she complimented my outfit. And the lunch we had. She spent most of it talking about the wedding. She even asked what I thought about centerpieces and acted like my input mattered. I thought we were bonding over wedding stuff. I love event design. Now I realized she was just setting the stage. It made my stomach turn. All those little moments I had let mean something. I'd been so hopeful. Then came another message, from someone else this time. She sucks for obvious reasons, but you could have just said, We'll talk privately later, and avoided the dramatic exit. You lowered yourself to her level by making a scene. I stared at that one for a long time. Maybe they were right. I typed back. Maybe you're right. I was just so shocked and hurt in the moment. 8 years of rejection followed by 2 months of fake friendship, just to get to money my dead mother left me. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. Not at that party, not the next day, not even now. But I do wonder, maybe I should have held it together. For Genesis's sake. She didn't deserve the spotlight turning into a disaster either. Still, I meant what I said. Nathan, Genesis's ex-husband, has been blowing up my phone for days. At first, it was just texts. You need to apologize. You ruined Adeline's special moment. You embarrassed her in front of everyone. I didn't respond. I figured if I ignored him long enough, he'd cool off and move on. No such luck. Yesterday, while Genesis was out running errands, I heard a knock at the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, there he was, Nathan, standing on my porch like he owned the place, hands in his jacket pockets, jaw set. I didn't invite him in. I just opened the screen door and waited. He didn't waste time. You know, he said, I always knew this would happen. Excuse me. This jealousy. You've been bitter since the beginning. About me. About my bond with Genesis. And now you're punishing Adeline for protecting what's left of her family dynamic. I blinked. Are you serious right now? She was trying to include you, he continued, voice rising. She reached out. You threw it in her face in front of everyone. I stayed calm, or tried to. Nathan, I said. Adeline ignored me for 8 years. And then, suddenly, she's my best friend the moment she finds out I inherited money? That's not inclusion. That's manipulation. He scoffed. She's a kid who's been through a lot. She's 24. I shot back. She's not a child. And I never tried to replace you. I've never disrespected you. All I ever wanted was basic respect in return. You're too sensitive, he said, waving a hand like he was brushing me off. Adeline was being strategic. That's what smart brides do. They plan. They prioritize. Strategic? I repeated, stunned. You really think using people emotionally for money is strategy? She was trying to make her dream wedding happen, he said, like that excused everything. And you made her feel small in front of everyone. That's when I stepped forward and looked him straight in the eye. Leave, I said, or I'll call the police. He stared me down for a long second. Then he shook his head and muttered, Genesis will see who you really are eventually. You can't keep a father from his daughter. I didn't respond. I just shut the door in his face. When Genesis got home and I told her what happened, she went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that meant she didn't believe me. Just the kind where you could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. He came here, she asked. To our house. Unannounced. Waited till you were gone, too, I said. Told me I was jealous of you and Nathan. That I was punishing Adeline for trying to protect her family dynamic. Genesis sat down slowly, jaw clenched. He said that to your face? Yeah. And when I brought up the 8 years Adeline ignored me, he said she's just a kid who's been through a lot. Like that justifies everything. She scoffed. She's 24. She's a grown woman. That's what I said. He even tried to paint her manipulation as strategy. He actually used that word, strategic. Like it was smart of her to fake a relationship just to get a check. Genesis stared at the wall for a long second. Then she pulled out her phone, scrolled for a moment, and hit dial. She put it on speaker. Nathan, she said, the second he picked up, you do not come to my house uninvited and harass my husband while I'm gone. That is not okay. I could hear his muffled voice trying to interrupt, but she didn't give him a chance. I don't care how angry you are, she continued. Showing up and accusing Miles of punishing Adeline for things you both know are untrue? That's crossing a line. Back. Off. She hung up before he could say another word. Then she turned to me and let out a long breath. This has gone too far. I need to talk to Adeline. She left the room to call her, and I heard parts of the conversation through the doorway. Genesis's voice was firm but not cruel. She told Adeline point blank that her father's behavior was unacceptable, that showing up at our home and accusing me like that was out of line. And Adeline, she cried, claimed everyone was ganging up on her, said she just wanted help with her wedding and didn't understand why everyone was being so harsh. I didn't even have to hear the whole call to know what was happening. The manipulation runs deep in that family dynamic. When Genesis came back into the room, she looked torn, angry, yes, but also hurt. She just kept saying she feels attacked, she said quietly, that she was trying to reach out and everyone's making her out to be some kind of villain. I nodded slowly. She's spinning it. Like always. Genesis rubbed her temple. I love her. She's still my daughter. But, Miles, she knows exactly what she's doing. She was starting to see it. I could tell. But that didn't make it easier for her. Then, later that night, Jake, the fiancé, called. Not me. Genesis. Apparently, Adeline had told him an entirely different version of events. Said she'd been trying for years to bond with me, but that I was always cold. That asking for help with the wedding was her way of trying to bridge the gap. Jake said, I thought she was making an effort. She told me she wanted to honor you at the engagement party. Genesis didn't sugarcoat it. Jake, that's not what happened, she said. Miles has tried since day one. He's shown up for every milestone. And Adeline has shut him out over and over again. What she did wasn't an olive branch. It was pressure. There was a pause. Jake sounded genuinely surprised. I didn't know. I really didn't know. Maybe you should ask her what else she's changed in the story, Genesis said gently. Because she's not being honest with you about our history. After the call, Genesis sat down beside me on the couch and leaned her head on my shoulder. I'm not paying for the wedding, I said quietly. I know, she replied. Neither am I. We were united on that. But the guilt trips didn't stop. The texts, the calls, I just wanted family support messages. I was exhausted. So was Genesis. She had been amazing through all of this, supportive, firm, clear, but I could see the weight in her eyes. The ache of being at odds with her own daughter. I hate this, I told her. I hate that I'm the cause of the rift. You're not, she said without hesitation. They are. You didn't ask for any of this. I nodded, but the guilt still lingered, even if I knew logically it wasn't mine to carry. And still, she called Nathan and told him to back off. I decided to extend an olive branch. Not because I think I was wrong, because I wasn't, but because Genesis has been suffering, and I hate seeing her in pain. Every time she talks about Adeline now, there's a heaviness in her voice. She's torn in two, and as much as I wish I could detach from it all, I can't. I love her. So I swallowed my pride and sent the text. Would you be open to meeting for coffee to talk things through? I didn't expect a yes, but Adeline agreed. We met yesterday at a quiet cafe, neutral ground. No familiar faces, no family tension. I got there early, ordered a tea I didn't really want, and sat near the back. When she arrived, she looked composed, polished, almost businesslike. I stood to greet her. Thanks for coming. She nodded, cool and polite. I have about 45 minutes. So that set the tone. I took a sip of my tea, then started. I just want to say, I'm sorry for how things went down at your party. I should have handled my response more privately. I was hurt, and I reacted emotionally. I'm sorry for that. She didn't even blink. I don't accept your apology. That hit harder than I expected. I blinked, tried to keep my tone calm. Okay, can I ask what you mean? You humiliated me, she said flatly. In front of my friends, my fiancé, our families. A private apology doesn't fix public humiliation. I opened my mouth to respond, but she cut me off. Besides, I don't think you're really sorry, she added. You're just trying to make yourself feel better. I took a long breath, nodded slowly. Can we talk about the past 2 months? I was genuinely hurt. I thought we were finally building a relationship. She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. I was being nice to you for your benefit, Miles, she said, her voice light, but laced with contempt. Dad kept going on about how much it hurt you that we weren't close. I thought, okay, I'll be friendly for a while. Maybe you'd feel included. And maybe you'd want to help with the wedding. She shrugged. It was supposed to be a win-win. You'd feel like family, and I'd get help with my special day. But no, you had to make it all about you and your feelings. I stared at her. Do you understand how manipulative that sounds? Her eyes narrowed. It's not manipulation. It's consideration. I considered your feelings by being nice to you. She leaned back in her chair. The least you could do is consider mine by helping with the wedding. The mental gymnastics were truly something to witness. I tried to stay calm. Adeline, real relationships aren't transactional like that. You don't get to fake kindness and expect a payout. That's not how people who care about each other operate. She rolled her eyes. You're being naive. All relationships have give and take. Then she looked me in the eye and said, flatly, here's what I want. I want a public apology, either at a family dinner with mom present or on social media where my friends can see it. I raised an eyebrow. A public apology? Yes, she said. I want you to say you overreacted, that you misunderstood my intentions, that you regret making a scene. And if I don't? I asked. She crossed her arms and looked me dead in the eye. If not, you're not welcome. I looked right at her and said it. Screw you. Then I stood up and walked out of that cafe without looking back. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. Just final. When I got home, Genesis was on the couch reading. I didn't say anything at first, just dropped my keys into the bowl by the door and sat beside her, heavy with frustration. She looked over. How'd it go? She wants a public apology, I said flatly. On social media or at a family dinner. Told me if I don't do that, I'm not welcome at her wedding. Genesis blinked, waiting. And I told her screw you and left. Her expression didn't flicker. She just nodded slowly, then reached for her phone. Give me a second. She called Adeline right then and there. I stayed quiet, listening. Adeline, she said the moment the call connected. That was manipulative and cruel. You're not going to emotionally blackmail Miles into apologizing for something he didn't do. Even from across the room, I could hear Adeline crying through the phone. You're choosing him over me, she said between sobs. You'll regret this when I have kids and you're not part of their lives. Genesis's voice didn't waver. I love you, Adeline, but I'm not going to enable this behavior. There was a long pause, then a click. She hung up. A few minutes later, Nathan's name popped up on Genesis's screen. I watched her sigh before opening the message. You're a pathetic excuse for a mother. You'll die alone with your selfish husband. Genesis stared at the screen for a second, lips tight, then locked her phone and set it face down on the table. For the record, I make good money. She looked over at me, then smiled faintly, though there was no joy in it. I know. The irony of being called selfish while refusing to get blackmailed is something, I added. That got a small exhale from her, half laugh, half exhaustion. Then the phone rang again. It was her parents. Adeline had gotten to them too. Apparently, she'd called them crying, saying we were excluding her, refusing to support her marriage, and painting herself as the victim in all of this. Genesis put the call on speaker and calmly walked them through everything. My history with Adeline, the engagement party ambush, the public apology ultimatum. There was a pause. Then her mom said, I love Adeline, but she's acting like a spoiled brat. I looked at Genesis. She looked like she might cry right then, but didn't. Later that night, Jake texted Genesis. Is there any way to work this out? Adeline's devastated. It's affecting our relationship. Genesis didn't sugarcoat things. She texted him back the full story again. Every detail, every manipulation. And she suggested, gently, that Jake really sit down and talk to Adeline about her expectations. Not just for us. For him. For their future. As for me, I'm not apologizing publicly for calling out manipulative behavior. I won't do it. Not for show. Not to save face. Not to be allowed into a wedding I was only invited to because of my bank account. Genesis supports me in that. Completely. She says she's proud of me for standing up for myself. And I believe her. But I also see what it's costing her. Last night, she went out for a walk by herself. Didn't take her phone. Was gone almost an hour. When she came back, her eyes were red. She didn't say anything, just crawled into bed beside me and rested her head on my shoulder. Seeing her grieve her relationship with her daughter is awful. I don't know where we go from here. I hate being the center of this drama, but I also can't reward this behavior. Genesis keeps telling me I did the right thing, that she's proud. But when I look at her, I can see the cost of this stand in her eyes. Genesis told me Jake's been asking more questions. Apparently, after the last conversation she had with him, he called her again. He wanted to know more, not about the engagement party or the fallout, but about Adeline's behavior over the years. The coldness, the silence, the way she treated me since the beginning. Genesis didn't sugarcoat it, but she didn't bash her either. She just laid out the facts. He asked you to talk about her? I asked, surprised. She nodded. He said he needed context. He wanted to understand why this has turned into such a mess. What did you say? I told him you've always tried. That you showed up, for her birthdays, for her graduation, for all the milestones, and that she barely acknowledged you. I told him how you encouraged me to spend time with her one-on-one when she didn't want you around. How you never forced your way into her life. I exhaled, rubbing my temples. And Jake didn't say much, she said. But I could tell it shook him. He just said, that's not what she told me. We sat in silence for a moment. Genesis looked down at her hands. I think he's starting to see a side of her he didn't know existed. She wasn't smug about it. She looked sad, tired, like a woman caught between truth and loyalty, between reality and the daughter she still loves. Later, I brought up something else that had been sitting heavy on my chest. That comment she made about grandkids, I said quietly. Genesis's eyes flicked to mine. I know, she said. It shook me too. She used them like pawns, Genesis. They don't even exist yet, and she's already threatening to use them to punish you. I've dreamed of being a grandmother, she said, voice cracking just slightly. I always pictured holding them, spoiling them, sending them home with too much sugar. And now, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. We both knew what it meant, that Adeline was already preparing to weaponize those hypothetical children as leverage. It made my stomach turn. We're documenting everything, I told her gently. Every message, every call, just in case we ever need it. Genesis nodded. We are. Every word, every threat, every boundary she tries to twist. We're not naive. This might not be the last time she uses family as a tool for control. So yes, we're keeping records. Of everything, just in case. After the coffee shop meeting, everything went quiet. No texts, no calls, no tension in the air, but also no peace. Just silence. For about a week, Genesis and Adeline didn't speak, and that silence was eating her alive. I'd catch her glancing at her phone during dinner, during TV, during moments she didn't even realize she was doing it, just unlocking it, scrolling, locking it again. She never said it out loud, but I could tell. She was hoping Adeline would reach out, hoping for some kind of bridge, a crack of light, anything. Then, Adeline started texting, but not to reconcile. The messages were passive-aggressive jabs disguised as memories, complaints, little barbs, all directed at me. Remember when Miles's work closed to my college graduation party? So disrespectful. I stared at Genesis's screen when she showed me. I came directly from my shift. I know, she murmured. She knows, too. Next one. Miles never even tried to bond with me when I was younger. That one hit especially hard. I had tried, over and over again. I'd offered to take her shopping, to see movies, to grab lunch. I'd asked about her classes, her art, her favorite music. Every time, she shut me down, shrugged me off, walked away, or rolled her eyes. Eventually, I stopped pushing. I gave her space, respect, everything she seemed to want. But now she was rewriting the past, casting me as the cold, distant villain. And Genesis? She didn't respond at first, just let the messages pile up. But they kept coming, and each one got nastier. Miles probably can't have his own kids, and that's why he's jealous of me. You'll regret choosing him over me when you're old, and he dumps you for someone younger. When she read that last one, Genesis went completely still. Her fingers tightened around her phone, and she didn't say anything for a long time. I watched the color drain from her face. Then, without a word, she stood up and walked out of the room. She called Adeline. I didn't hear everything, but later she told me what she said. Her voice trembled when she repeated it. I told her, Genesis said, I'm not choosing you over her. I'm choosing respect and decency over manipulation and cruelty. I said, you're my daughter and I love you, but I don't like who you've become. She looked away, eyes glassy. I told her you've shown her nothing but kindness for 8 years, and she's treated you like dirt. I told her she was lying about you, trying to poison our relationship. My throat tightened. And how did she respond? Genesis swallowed. She screamed, said I was brainwashed, that you'd turn me against her. She said Nathan was right about me all along, but didn't say what he'd told her. Then she said she was dead to me, that when she has children, they'll never know my name. I didn't know what to say. A few minutes later, I found Genesis in our bedroom. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, phone on the nightstand, just staring at the wall, like her soul had left the room. She didn't flinch when I sat beside her. She didn't look at me. She just sat there, rigid, silent, and utterly broken. So I did the only thing I could. I wrapped my arms around her, and I held her while she cried. This woman, this strong, steady woman who I've rarely seen shed a tear in nearly a decade of marriage, just collapsed in my arms, sobbing, not loud or dramatic, just broken, silent shudders and sharp inhales, clinging to me like I was the only thing anchoring her. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? But then things got worse. Adeline went nuclear on social media. She posted a long, dramatic rant, something along the lines of, sometimes your parents aren't toxic until they choose a new family over you. Breaking generational trauma means cutting out negativity, even when it hurts. She didn't name us, but anyone who's been within 10 feet of this mess knew exactly who she meant. Within hours, Genesis's sister called. So did 3 of his friends. Everyone wanted to know what happened. They'd seen the post. The way she framed it made it sound like Genesis abandoned her in favor of me, like she'd erased her child to start fresh with a selfish, controlling second husband. There was no mention of her behavior, no mention of the years of coldness, the manipulations, the emotional blackmail. It was all us, all betrayal. That night, Jake called Genesis. He sounded tired, Genesis told me later. Worn out, like someone caught in a riptide and just now realizing how deep the current goes. He said he's trying to understand her. Genesis told me quietly, sitting on the edge of the bed. But he's struggling. Her stories keep changing. I looked up. Changing how? Genesis pulled her knees up and wrapped her arms around them. First, it was that you were mean to her. Then it was that you were cold and dismissive. Now she's saying you were controlling, manipulative. I sighed. That's 3 different accusations with no overlap. Exactly, Genesis said. And Jake asked me point blank, has Miles ever actually done anything mean to Adeline? What did you say? I told him the truth, that you've only ever been kind, that you went out of your way for her, that you respected her boundaries even when they hurt you. I nodded, staring at the ceiling. He was quiet for a long time, she added. Then he just said, I need to think about some things. The next day, Adeline called Genesis in full meltdown mode. She was screaming, saying Genesis had turned Jake against her, that if they broke up, it would be our fault. Apparently, Jake had asked for specific examples of my supposed cruelty. She couldn't give him any, so she turned on him, accused him of taking her side, said he didn't understand her, that he wasn't being supportive. Genesis's parents found out about the social media post, too. They were furious. They've tried calling Adeline, texting her, even emailing. She won't respond. Radio silence. It's devastated her mother. Adeline was her first grandchild. They were close once, so close. Genesis's mom always lit up talking about her. Now, she's heartbroken, and I feel guilty, even though I know I've done nothing wrong. I tell myself that. I remind myself of the facts. I've never raised my voice at Adeline, never insulted her, never even defended myself the way I probably should have. But still, I feel responsible. I see how much this is eating Genesis alive, and it tears me up. She keeps reassuring me. This isn't your fault, she says. She made her choices. But I can still see it in her eyes, like something inside her is cracking more every day. And then there's Nathan. He won't stop. He drives by our house sometimes. We've got a Ring camera. We see him. He sent Genesis email after email, rage-filled, venomous messages calling him a failure as a father, saying she's brainwashed, saying she'll regret choosing me. We've talked about getting a restraining order, but Genesis hesitates. Once we do that, she said the other night, voice raw, there's no going back, no pretending this is fixable. She looked at me, and for the first time in days, her eyes were wet again. I'm scared it'll destroy any chance of reconciliation with Adeline. I don't believe Adeline is truly seeking reconciliation. What she seems to want is control, compliance on her terms. And that's something neither Genesis nor I are willing to give her. I honestly feel bad for Jake. He seems like a decent guy, quiet, respectful, the kind who listens more than he speaks. And now, he's stuck in the middle of something he probably never saw coming. Watching him try to make sense of Adeline's shifting stories, hearing him ask Genesis point-blank questions, it's clear he's starting to realize that the woman he's planning to marry might not be who he thought she was. Genesis told him, I respect you for asking the hard questions, Jake. It takes integrity to do that instead of blindly accepting someone's version of events. Jake had just nodded, looking down, like he didn't trust his own voice in that moment. We both agreed later. He looked shaken. It's strange. Adeline was a sweet kid once. I've seen the photos, heard the stories. But Genesis always said she had a stubborn streak. When the divorce happened, Adeline was just 12. She took it hard. Nathan, of course, didn't help. According to Genesis, he said all kinds of terrible things during the custody battle. Genesis only found out how much of it stuck years later, after Adeline left behind a teenage diary at Nathan's house. It was filled with resentment, misdirected anger, and a clear message. Her loyalty belonged to her dad, and anyone who came after was the enemy. By the time I entered the picture, Adeline was 16. She had already made up her mind. She didn't want anything to do with me, and nothing I did ever changed that. If anything, it's gotten worse with time. Or maybe she's just gotten bolder. The manipulation that used to be subtle is now loud, calculated, and out in the open. 2 days ago, Adeline showed up unannounced. Genesis and I were home, just finishing lunch. The doorbell rang, and when Genesis opened the door, there she was. Adeline, standing on the porch with red eyes and a tissue clutched in her hand. Mom, she said softly, can we talk? Genesis hesitated for just a second, then stepped aside to let her in. She called for me. Miles, can you join us? I walked into the room, quietly, trying to keep my expression neutral. Adeline looked right through me, like I wasn't even there. I came to talk to my mom alone, she said, her voice flat now. Genesis didn't blink. Miles is my husband. He's part of this conversation. Else you can leave. Adeline said nothing, just crossed her arms and sat down stiffly on the couch. She didn't glance in my direction again. She started talking, fast, about how much she missed Genesis, how she'd been doing a lot of thinking, how important family really was. She said she wanted to fix things between them, that she regretted how far things had gone. For a moment, there was something almost hopeful in Genesis's face. But then came the catch. Her version of fixing things. It wasn't reconciliation. It was revision. Adeline sat there on our couch, hands folded neatly in her lap, voice trembling just enough to sound emotional, but not broken. She looked only at Genesis, not once at me. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she began, about how things went wrong, about how much I miss having a relationship with you. Genesis softened a little. I miss you too, she said carefully. I've always wanted us to be close. She nodded, then added, I think, if we're going to move forward, we need some boundaries. A fresh start. I stayed quiet. I had a bad feeling about where this was headed. She looked at Genesis, not even glancing in my direction. What I'm saying is, I want to rebuild what we had, but it has to be just us. You and me, without interference. Genesis frowned. Interference? Miles, she said bluntly. He's part of the problem. Every time we've had tension, he's somehow involved. I don't think we can heal if he's always in the middle. Genesis shifted in her seat. Adeline, Miles is my husband. He's not a bystander in my life. Adeline's jaw tightened. I'm not asking for forever. Just visits. Private time. Maybe lunch every other Sunday, or a dinner once a month. Just you and me. No pressure, no drama. We can even do holidays together, like we used to. And when I have kids, I want them to grow up with their grandmother and their actual grandfather, my dad. But I think it's better for them not to be confused. Confused? Genesis asked. Adeline hesitated for half a second. I mean, it's just cleaner if they don't know someone who isn't really family. That was when it landed. She was perfectly serious. If she had children, she was planning to exclude me from their lives entirely. Not even a vague acknowledgement. In her ideal world, her kids would know Genesis as grandmother, Nathan as the grandfather, and me? I'd just be nothing. A ghost. A stranger in the family photos. Someone erased before the story could even begin. She really meant it when she said they would grow up without knowing I exist. Genesis sat still for a second after Adeline finished laying out her terms like this was some sort of business negotiation. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just looked over at me, her eyes wide, almost pleading, like she was trying to hold herself together with sheer willpower. Then she turned back to her and asked, gently but firmly, what about Miles? He's my husband. He's family, too. Adeline didn't flinch. He's your husband, not my family. Her voice was so cold it could have frozen the room. I'm willing to have a relationship with you, Mom, but that's all I can offer, she added. Take it or leave it. My stomach dropped. I knew Genesis was hoping, praying, for some kind of olive branch, no matter how thin. But this wasn't peace. This was a power play. Genesis looked at me again. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The answer was already in her eyes. She turned back to her and said, steady as I've ever heard him, in that case, I'll leave it. Miles and I are a unit. I won't have a relationship that excludes him. I watched Adeline's entire expression shift. The fake warmth vanished, replaced by something darker and sharp-edged. Her voice snapped like a whip. So you were choosing him over me. Genesis didn't rise to it. She didn't match her tone. She just replied, calmly, I'm choosing not to enable this behavior. You don't have to like Miles, but you do need to respect that he's my husband and treat him with basic courtesy. That's the minimum I'll accept. There was a pause. Then Adeline stood abruptly. Then I guess we're done here, she spat. Don't expect a wedding invitation. Don't expect to meet your grandchildren. You've made your choice. She made it to the door before turning back. And for the first time since she walked in, she looked at me. The hatred in her eyes chilled me. It wasn't pain. It wasn't sadness. It was pure resentment. I hope you're happy, she hissed. You got what you wanted. You've successfully separated a mother from her daughter. I finally found my voice. I tried to stay composed, even though my hands were trembling. Adeline, I said quietly, I've never wanted that. I've only ever wanted to be treated with respect. She scoffed, a bitter, joyless sound. Respect? You want respect? She shook her head. You're nothing to me. You'll always be nothing. Just the man who destroyed my family. And with that, she walked out. The door closed behind her. Genesis stood there for a few seconds, shoulders rigid, lips pressed tightly together. Then she sank down on the couch next to me and just crumbled. She broke down. I pulled her into my arms and we cried. Both of us. No words, just grief, disappointment, heartbreak. She kept whispering, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what she said. I never thought she'd say something like that to you. I'm so sorry. I held her hand tight and looked her in the eye. I told her none of this is her fault. 3 days later, Jake called and told Genesis he had called off the wedding. I was in the living room when I noticed the color drain from her face as she answered. Halfway through the call, she put it on speaker so I could hear. Jake's voice was steady, composed, but you could tell there was heaviness behind every word. I've done a lot of thinking, he began. About everything. About Adeline. About the kind of life I'd be walking into. Genesis didn't say a word. She just listened, her eyes wide, lips parted in shock. I kept getting conflicting stories, Jake went on. The things she said about Miles, they changed each time I asked. And when I finally pressed her for specifics, real examples of what he supposedly did to her, she couldn't give me any. My chest tightened. I hadn't expected this. Honestly, I thought Jake would stay silent, keep the peace. But instead, he was pulling the curtain back. And when I told her I needed space to think, she lost it. Yelled that I was taking your side. That if I really loved her, I'd be on hers. But Genesis, he hesitated, then added softly, I don't think there should be sides. Genesis finally found her voice. I agree. Jake let out a long, tired breath. It feels like she doesn't see people as people, just as tools, or obstacles. There was a brief silence before he said, I ended it. I can't spend my life with someone who manipulates the people closest to her. I just wanted to thank you both for being honest. Genesis's voice trembled slightly. Jake, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I'm not, he said gently. Not really. I think you might have saved me from a life of constant tension. When the call ended, Genesis sat motionless, still staring at her phone. You okay? I asked quietly. She nodded slowly. I think so. We're getting there. We didn't say it out loud, but we both understood what Jake's decision revealed, and how far gone things really were. The day after Jake called off the wedding, Nathan called Genesis. And from the moment she answered, I could tell it wasn't going to be civil. I was standing in the kitchen, cleaning out the coffee pot when I heard her say, Hi, Nathan. Her voice was cautious, guarded. Then her brows furrowed as he launched in. I couldn't hear his words, but it didn't matter. I knew that tone, that blaming, bitter edge he always slipped into whenever things didn't go Adeline's way. Genesis put the phone on speaker. You've ruined her life. Nathan shouted. You and that man of yours. This is on you, Genesis. She's heartbroken. Do you even care? Genesis kept her tone even. She's heartbroken because she got caught lying to her fiancé, Nathan. Jake made a decision based on her behavior, not mine. Don't put this on us. She only acted that way because of what you and Miles have done to her for years, he snapped. You never supported her, and he never accepted her. That's a lie. Genesis cut in sharply. Don't rewrite history just because it fits your narrative now. Miles has been nothing but respectful to her for 8 years. She's the one who pushed him away, ignored him, belittled him. And you've done nothing but feed that behavior. Nathan scoffed. Oh, here we go? You're blaming me now. Yes, Genesis said, with quiet conviction. Because it is your fault. You poisoned her against me after the divorce. You encouraged her to see every man I dated as a threat. You made it harder for her to accept that I moved on and found someone who treats me with love and respect. You raised her to believe manipulation was normal. He went silent on the other end. For a second, I thought he might hang up. But then he growled. You'll regret this, Genesis. You've lost her forever. All for him. Genesis didn't even flinch. If I've lost her, it's because she chose lies and control over love and honesty. And if that's the result of trying to set healthy boundaries, then so be it. Nathan muttered something under his breath and hung up without another word. Genesis stood still, her jaw clenched, staring at the phone for a moment before setting it down gently on the counter. I walked over and put a hand on her back. You okay? I asked. She nodded, slowly. Yeah, I am. Tired, but clear. We stood there in silence for a moment, just breathing. I was proud of her, not because she stood up for me, but because she stood up for herself, for what was right, even when it hurt. A few days after Jake ended things, Adeline called Genesis. She didn't waste time. No hello, no hesitation, just straight into blame. This is all your fault. I could hear her yelling through the phone from across the room. You couldn't stand that I was happy, could you? You and him had to ruin everything. Genesis didn't say a word. She didn't flinch. She just stared out the window, listening to her daughter spiral. Cold, sharp words fueled by ego and desperation. You broke up my engagement, Mom, Adeline snapped. You chose him over me, and now Jake thinks I'm some manipulative monster. You did this. You and that pathetic husband of yours. Genesis slowly pulled the phone away from her ear. And then, without a word, she hung up and blocked the number. No fight. No justification. Just silence. I stood frozen in the hallway, watching her. You okay? I asked gently. She turned to me, her eyes rimmed with quiet resolve. I've had enough, Miles. I've spent years walking on eggshells. I'm done. That night, something in Genesis changed. She logged onto her social media account, something she rarely does, and typed out a short, brutally honest post. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cruel. It was simply the truth. I'm tired of the lies. I won't let someone rewrite history to make themselves look like a victim. I've stood by silently for years while I was disrespected and manipulated, all in the name of keeping the peace. No more. Miles is my husband. He's a good man, and I will not sacrifice truth for appearances. If you're going to try and tear people down with lies, be prepared to face the consequences. Some of us are done staying quiet. If you're losing people, maybe it's not because everyone's against you, but because you're finally being seen for who you really are. It was like a fire had finally been lit. Within hours, Adeline's latest post, another cryptic rant about betrayal, vanished. And so did her followers. One by one, the likes disappeared. Friends unfollowed her. People who used to comment supportive emojis now said nothing at all. Genesis didn't gloat. She didn't even smile. But there was peace in her expression, a weight lifted, maybe for the first time in years. I later found out that Adeline had messaged a few mutual friends to defend herself. None of them replied. The group chats, the bridesmaid threads, gone. The only person still in her corner was Nathan. And frankly, the two of them deserved each other. Genesis and I sat on the back porch that evening, a quiet breeze moving through the trees. She took my hand. "She's burned every bridge," she said, more sad than angry. "But I'm not chasing after her anymore." I squeezed her hand gently. "You don't need to. You told the truth. That's more than enough." She nodded slowly, then leaned her head on my shoulder. For the first time in a long time, the silence between us felt calm, not strained. We weren't healed, but we were honest. And in this house, at least, that was sacred. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.